Trump told supporters Panama was charging too much for U.S.-owned ships to pass through, considering how much Washington spent to build the waterway more than 100 years ago.
It is a geographical anomaly, a sliver of land so thin it looks as if the continents are barely holding hands. Panama. For over a century, this is where the world has defied geography, lifting megaton vessels over mountains to bridge the Atlantic and the Pacific. But if you look closely at the satellite feed today, you won't see movement. You will see a queue. Hundreds of vessels, billions of dollars in cargo, paralyzed in a maritime parking lot. The Panama Canal is breaking down, not by sabotage and not by war. It is being strangled by the one resource it was designed to exploit, fresh water. And as the supply runs dry, the world's superpowers are scrambling for a solution that sounds impossible. They are planning to abandon the water entirely. This is the story of how the world's most vital shortcut became a trap, and the radical, multi-billion-dollar engineering project designed to replace it. To understand the crisis, you must understand the flaw in the canal's design. It is not a sea-level channel like Suez. It is a hydraulic elevator. Ships do not sail through Panama. They are lifted 85 feet above sea level and lowered on the other side. The engine of this system is fresh water. Every single ship that transits the canal requires roughly 50 million gallons of water to operate the locks. That water is drawn from Gatun Lake, a massive artificial reservoir. Once used, it is flushed into the ocean, lost to the canal system, and replenished only if the rains return. The Canal Authority has tried to address this. When the expanded Neo-Panamax locks opened in 2016, they included water-saving basins designed to recycle roughly 60% of the water used per transit. It was a significant investment in sustainability. But even with that engineering, the system remains hostage to rainfall. The basins recycle water, they do not create it. For decades, rainfall replenished the lake faster than the canal could drain it. But in 2023 and 2024, the climate shifted. A historic drought exposed the canal's fuel source as dangerously finite. The physics became brutal. As the lake levels dropped, the Canal Authority had no choice but to ration gravity. They cut the number of daily transits. They limited the draft, the depth, of the ships allowed to enter. For global logistics, this was a catastrophe. A ship waiting at anchor burns fuel, wages, and time. Some captains, facing indefinite delays, made the desperate decision to turn around and sail the long way, around Cape Horn. An extra 8,000 miles. An entire logistical era undone by the shrinking of a single lake. But there was one specific victim in this crisis, a victim that caught the attention of Washington. In recent years, the primary cargo traversing Panama hasn't been consumer electronics or cars. It has been American energy. The United States is a titan of hydrocarbon exports, liquefied natural gas, or LNG, which is supercooled methane bound for power plants, and natural gas liquids, or NGLs, propane, butane, ethane, the feedstocks that keep Asia's petrochemical industry alive. These are different products, carried on different ships, serving different markets. But they share one thing in common. They almost all flow through Panama. By some industry estimates, the vast majority of American NGL exports to Asia depend on this single corridor. It is less an artery and more a bottleneck disguised as one. When the drought hit, this bottleneck constricted. The delay wasn't just losing money, it was threatening energy security. The U.S. stood to lose billions in stalled exports, and Panama was watching its primary revenue stream evaporate along with its lake water. Both nations realized that relying on rainfall to move the world's most critical resources was no longer a strategy. It was a gamble. And so, a new plan was drafted, a plan to sever the link between the canal and the climate. The proposal surfaced in late 2025. If water is the bottleneck, remove the water from the equation. The plan is to build a dry canal. Not a road, not a rail line, but a dedicated energy corridor, a pipeline. The concept is deceptively simple. A roughly 47-mile pipeline cutting through the isthmus, shadowing the existing canal zone. Think of it as a transcontinental extension cord. Plug in on one coast, draw energy on the other. But this is not just a pipe, it is a transformation system. On the Atlantic side, a massive terminal would receive American gas carriers.
The liquid cargo is offloaded, regasified, and pressurized. It is then shot across the continent through the pipeline to the Pacific coast. There, a mirror facility cools it back into liquid and loads it onto ships waiting on the other side.
It is a conveyor belt for energy. It doesn't care about drought. It doesn't care about lake levels. The projected capacity is up to 2.5 million barrels per day, though final figures will depend on engineering and regulatory realities. The estimated cost sits between $4 and $8 billion, a staggering sum, yet significantly cheaper than digging a new canal. The proposed timeline is aggressive. Bids as early as 2026, construction potentially beginning in 2027, with a target of full operation by the end of the decade. History suggests mega projects of this scale almost always run late and over budget. But even a delayed pipeline would offer something the canal cannot: independence from the weather. There is, however, a dimension the engineering blueprints do not capture. This pipeline would cut through Panamanian sovereign territory, a nation with long historical memory of foreign powers controlling its infrastructure. The original canal zone was U.S.-administered territory until 1999. Any new American-backed corridor will require careful negotiation, not just with regulators, but with a population that has strong views about who controls their land. And then there is the jungle itself. The proposed route passes near ecologically sensitive areas. Environmental groups have already raised concerns about deforestation, habitat disruption, and the long-term impact of industrial infrastructure in one of the most biodiverse regions on the planet. Building the pipeline is an engineering challenge. Getting permission to build it may be the harder fight. While the pipeline is the long-term cure, Panama is bleeding now. The government is currently attempting to engineer its way out of the drought with stopgap measures that border on science fiction. The most significant is the Indio River Project, a plan to dam a nearby river and tunnel its water into the depleted Gatun Lake. It is a multi-billion-dollar bucket brigade designed to buy the canal a few more years of reliable operation. The project faces its own hurdles: displacement of local communities, environmental review, and a construction timeline that may not move fast enough to match the pace of the drought. Panama has also explored a more speculative option: cloud seeding, bombarding the atmosphere with silver iodide or salt particles to provide condensation nuclei and coax moisture from passing clouds. It is a technique deployed at scale by China and the UAE, with mixed and debated results. But atmospheric physics is chaotic. You can seed a cloud, but you cannot command where it rains, how much falls, or whether the moisture reaches the watershed you need. For a canal that requires billions of gallons replenished annually, cloud seeding remains, at best, a supplement, not a solution. These are attempts to salvage a water-based system in a world that is drying up. The future, it seems, belongs to steel, not water. And Panama is not the only nation realizing this. The shift from open waterways to closed pipelines is becoming a global phenomenon. But as Panama enters the bidding phase, they would do well to study the nightmares unfolding in Africa, because pipelines solve old problems and create entirely new ones. In East Africa, the EACOP project, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, attempts to move oil from landlocked Uganda to the Tanzanian coast. But this oil is waxy. At ambient temperatures, it solidifies into a substance resembling cold honey. To move it, the pipeline must be heated. For nearly 900 miles, the pipe is wrapped in thermal insulation and electric tracing, keeping the crude at exactly 122 degrees Fahrenheit. It is the world's longest heated vascular system. An extraordinary feat, but also an extraordinary vulnerability. A system that must be kept warm across the breadth of a continent is a system with 900 miles of potential failure points. But engineering is only half the battle. In West Africa, the Niger-Benin pipeline proves that politics is harder to navigate than terrain. Designed to free Niger's oil from the center of the continent, the pipeline became a hostage. Following a coup in Niger, the border with Benin closed. The port was blockaded. The pipeline sits there, a 1,200-mile masterpiece of engineering, paralyzed not by physics, but by a diplomatic standoff.
Panama's proposed gas corridor faces fewer political enemies. It would operate within a single, stable nation with strong trade ties to Washington. But the lesson from Africa remains. When you build a choke point, you create a target. A canal can be rationed. A pipeline can be shut off.
The era of depending on natural geography is ending. For centuries, humanity relied on rivers, lakes, and oceans to move goods across the world. We still do, and we will for decades to come. The canal will not be demolished. Ships will not stop sailing. But at the choke points, those narrow, fragile places where global trade is forced through a keyhole, we are retreating from nature into systems we can control. The Panama Canal was a miracle of the 20th century, a triumph of water. The proposed Panama Pipeline would be a monument to the 21st, a triumph of steel. It will not replace the canal, but it may save the trade the canal can no longer guarantee. For the global economy, the stakes could not be higher. The water is running low. The ships are waiting. And for the first time in a century, the answer to Panama's geography might not be found in the water at all. It might be buried in the ground beneath it.